Hi Internet, Shannon here again. I've done a few vlogs, mostly on movies that I'm either excited or not excited about. One movie coming up that I am excited about is The Maze Runner. I heard about it at WonderCon. They had a panel there, and one of the people there at the panel was James Dashner, the author of the book. And because I'm a believer that with very few exceptions, the book is pretty much always better than the movie. I think like one exception is Watchmen. That I always like to read a book before the movie comes out. And because I like to discuss TV shows and movies, I also like discussing books. And in addition to that, Maze Runner is a book where there are lots of mysteries being unfolded, things to be discovered. When James Dashner, the author, was at the panel at WonderCon, he mentioned how he was watching Lost at the time, and it definitely contributed to his vibe of having characters who don't know what's going on, having to sort of discover things, discover themselves, learn about each other, and starting off with this kind of blank slate beginning to start over, which can be good or bad. Lost was one of my favorite shows while it was on, still is. So I thought I would have lots and lots of fun reading through Maze Runner, and I thought, since as I said I like discussing books and TV shows and everything else, because I usually don't shut up, I thought it would be fun to do a vlog about my reading through Maze Runner before the movie comes out, kind of in the same vein of Alex Reads Twilight. If you ever watch those videos, that guy's hilarious. I'm just doing this because I actually like it, though, not because I'm making fun of it. So, this is me going through the Maze Runner. It's about 10 weeks as of right now before the movie comes out. My plan is to have one new video up every Monday, except for when I take a break after Comic-Con, because then I'm in a coma for like 2 days. I'm going to go ahead and start with the first 7 chapters of the Maze Runner. They're pretty quick chapters, and then I'll stop after each of those, make all my notes, do a video on Monday. I always take notes in my books, but I do post-its, because if I ever lend books, I don't want people getting stuck with my chicken scratch. So, just want to say already, if I forget at the end, thanks for watching the video. And if you also have any questions or comments about the theories or mysteries, because there are lots of mysteries, at least in the first 7 chapters, please feel free to leave comments below. No spoilers. I feel like I'm inviting spoilers by saying no spoilers. But again, part of what I'm looking forward to with this book, and then how they portrayed in the movie, is the mysteries unfolding. So, again, pretty please, no spoilers. So I'm going to go ahead and start. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to read, little snippets from each chapter, point out the things that I made notes about, if I can read my own writing. And eventually, if there are other people commenting or other people interested as this goes along, might be fun to do more of a Google Hangout like a book club. Because normally book clubs get started, and then no one talks about the books, which is why I don't join book clubs, because I'm a nerd and I want to talk about the books, not someone's recipe for the cake they brought. It's not in the book. I don't want to talk about it. So, anyway, I think I've done enough rambling. Maze Runner, Chapter 1. He began his new life standing up, surrounded by cold darkness and stale, dusty air. Metal ground against metal, a lurching shudder shook the floor beneath him. He fell down at the sudden movement and shuffled backward, on his hands and feet, drops of sweat beating on his forehead despite the cool air. His back struck a hard metal wall. He slid along it until he hit the corner of the room. Sinking to the floor, he pulled his legs up tight against his body, hoping his eyes would soon adjust to the darkness. Skip, 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 chains of metal and pulleys, workings of an ancient steel factory echoed through the room. Skip, skip, skip. He wanted to cry, but no tears came. He could only sit there alone, waiting. My name is Thomas, he thought. That was the only thing he could remember about his life. So here's the interesting part. Here's that blank slate, where he's going. And I kind of already knew where he was going before I read, because they talked about it at the panel. This is Thomas, and he has no memories of his previous life. He didn't understand how this could be possible. His mind functioned without flaws, trying to calculate his surroundings and predicament. Knowledge flooded his thoughts, facts and images, memories and details of the world and how it worked. He pictured snow on trees, running down a leaf-strewn road, eating a hamburger, the moon casting a pale glow on a grassy meadow, swimming in a lake, a busy city square with hundreds of people bustling about their business. So it seems like it's seasons working backwards, but that could just be the order of the seasons. One of the questions I had was whether seasons matter in the book. They don't, because when he gets to the top, he heard noises above, voices, and fear squeezed his chest. And then we hear the voices of those. Look at that Shank. How old is he? Looks like a clunk in a t-shirt. You're the clunk, shuck face. Dude, it smells like feet down there. Hope you enjoyed the one-way trip, Greenie. Ain't no ticket back, bro. Those are all my voices for the guys. I hear voices in my head when I read. Thomas was hit with a wave of confusion, blistered with panic. The voices were odd, tinged with echo. Some of the words were completely foreign, others familiar. He willed his eyes to adjust as he squinted toward the light and those speaking. At first, he could only see shifting shadows, but soon they turned into shapes of bodies, people bending over the hole. Skip. So there were boys, all of them, some younger, some older. Thomas didn't know what he'd expected, but seeing those faces puzzled him. They were just teenagers. Kids. Some of his fear melted away, but not enough to calm his racing heart. Someone lowered the rope above his head, the end of it tied to a big loop. Thomas hesitated, then stepped in with his right foot, clutched the rope, and was yanked toward the sky. Hands reached down, lots of hands, grabbing by his clothes, pulling him up. Skip. All right. The chorus of voices had grown silent, but someone spoke as they yanked him over the sharp edge of the dark box, and Thomas knew he'd never forget the words. Nice to meet you, Shank, the boy said. Welcome to the Glade. So, short version, next couple chapters are filled with lots of questions about the Glade, but the short version is the Glade is like this really nice big courtyard place in the middle of, you guessed it if you didn't already know, a maze. So Thomas is there. He asks lots of questions, but no one gives him any answers, at least not initially. He asks where he is. They tell him nowhere good. He hears lots of the slang that the boys use, like shank, shuck, keeper, slopper. Shuck and shucking are kind of fun to use frequently as I've been reading this book. So, anyway, they're all pretty organized, though, in the Glade. They have a garden with food. They have, not really a farm, but a small little area with animals, including a slaughterhouse. They're all pretty self-sufficient, but they have electricity that works. They have water. They don't have any seasons, though. Never changes in the Glade. So that's an interesting thing. And there are a few key lines that really jump out, because he keeps asking where he is. He's definitely scared, which makes sense. You arrive in a strange place, have no memory, you're probably not, feeling too cozy. If you ain't scared, Albie, that's basically the leader, Albie said, you ain't human. Act any different and I'd throw you off the cliff because it'd mean you're a psycho. The cliff? Thomas asked, blood draining from his face. Shuck it. See, it's fun. Shuck it, Albie said, rubbing his eyes. Ain't no way to start these conversations, do you get me? We don't kill shanks like you here, I promise. Just try and avoid being killed. Survive, whatever. So, this also reminds me of Lost. Scary things in the jungle. Well, there's not really jungle here. Well, it's kind of overgrown in the maze, but it's a maze, but I'm jumping ahead. So, first day, they mentioned that the box, which is what Thomas traveled up in, the box came late, which is slightly unusual, apparently. So, spends his first day there. He makes friends with a new guy called Chuck in chapter 3, after hearing what's called a beetle blade in a tree. Let's see, what does it do? Yeah, just a flash of silver, red light, clicking noises, so probably something mechanical. And Chuck says, where does he say it? That was one of the beetle blades. Calls Thomas a shank. So it's kind of nice, I guess. So He's the newest newbie. Chuck was the newest newbie before that. Beetle blades are part of the way that they watch you. Also, there are grievers. Grievers apparently got one of the boys who has been screaming like a wounded animal in the main house where everybody is. So we try to find out a little bit more about that. Let's see. So Thomas realizes that none of them, from his conversation with Chuck, remember anything else at all. So none of them remember their parents. None of them remember where they came from. Thomas finds this interesting, but at least a little relaxing that he's not the only one that, lost all of his memory. He really, really, really wants to get answers, though, about the guy who's been screaming. So he goes into the main house, even though he's told that Newt and Albie aren't going to allow him to go in there. And Gally, who likes to be called Captain Gally, gives him a hard time about it. But basically says that he's been through what Benny, the screaming guy, is going through. And he says to Thomas, I know what old Benny baby's going through. I've been there, and I saw you during the changing. And I bet your first meal from Fry Pan that Benny'll say he sees you too. So, yeah. Gally does not like Thomas. He's kind of pushy, but I get the feeling that that's just his personality. But yeah, so now we have something new about Thomas. Gally says he's seen him, and we'll see what that means. When he gets upstairs to actually get a look at Benny, who's the screaming, moaning guy, it's not so bueno. Inside the room, Newt and Albie crouched over something lying on a bed. Thomas leaned in closer to see what the fuss was all about, but when he got a clear look at the condition of the patient, his heart went cold. He had to fight the bile that surged up his throat. The look was fast, only a few seconds, but it was enough to haunt him forever. A twisted, pale figure writhing in agony, chest bare and hideous. Tight, rigid cords of sickly green veins webbed across the boy's body and limbs like ropes under his skin. Purplish bruises covered the kid's, red hives, bloody scratches. His bloodshot eyes bulged, darting back and forth. The image had already burned into Thomas's mind before Albie jumped up, blocking the view, but not the moans and screams, pushing Thomas from the room, then slamming the door shut behind him. What are you doing up here, Greenie? Albie yelled, his lips taut with anger, eyes on fire. Thomas felt weak. I want some answers, he murmured, but he couldn't put any strength in his words. Felt himself give up inside. What was wrong with that kid? So anyway, he leaves. It didn't go so well. The changing is clearly not a pleasant experience. Probably didn't think it was, though, because the guy had been screaming and moaning. So, Chapter 4. Thomas is leaning against a tree, waiting for Chuck. Tries to talk to him about it. Doesn't really tell him anything. Chuck brings him some food, though. Mentions Fry Pan again. Fry Pan's the guy that cooks the food, apparently. And when Thomas tries to talk to him about Benny, Chuck doesn't really know, because he didn't see him, and he doesn't know what's going on. So Thomas tries a different tact, asks him, what's out there, outside the Glade, and Chuck doesn't know. He says he's never been outside the Glade. And Thomas realizes that he's hiding something, not getting any answers, starting to grind on his nerves. And so when he asks Chuck, he said, why are you guys so secretive? That's just the way it is. Things are really weird around here, and most of us don't know everything. Half of everything. So I'm just going to pause here. This is something that drives me nuts in TV shows, movies, books. You think if people just talked about stuff, they would start getting to the bottom of things. And part of me gets it. There are probably trust issues in a place where no one can remember half their life. And there's a big maze surrounding things and monsters that make you all greenish and purple. But I think, like if it's a zombie apocalypse, I think it's important to make friends, talk about your past, discuss resources, but no one does this, and so I think they should. Just an annoyance of mine, but as you can tell, I like to talk, so. Alright, anyway, so they talk about the maze, and Chuck lets him know that the doors are about to close, and Thomas is like, close? What are you talking about? Because the maze has these huge openings on the sides of the Glade. And so Chuck explains that they're doors and that they close every night. And Thomas doesn't believe him, But Chuck points to the east door, says, "This is the east door," and he's shocked by how big this thing is up close. I mean, it's at least 20 feet across. The break in the wall went all the way up to the top, far above. The edges that bordered the vast openings were smooth, except for one odd repeating pattern on both sides. On the left side of the east door, deep holes several inches in diameter and spaced a foot apart were bored into the rock, beginning near the ground and continuing all the way up. On the right side of the door, foot-long rods jutted out from the wall, also several inches in diameter, in the same pattern of holes facing on the other side. The purpose was obvious. "You kidding?" Thomas asked. "You weren't playing with me. The walls really move?" "What else would I have meant?" And this is an example where I feel like if someone's giving you info, just, take it for, straightforward. So, but it's kind of terrifying that now, even though it's kind of a nice place that he's in, the fact that the place shuts up at night, and I think it would make even most people kind of claustrophobic. So, Thomas tries getting answers, but Chuck just gets frustrated and he's like, "I don't know, they just move." And so, and then he mentions something happens in the maze. Those walls shift every night too. So that's a tough maze. Walls shift every night. So odds are probably never ever getting out of it. So Thomas is trying to figure it out. It's saying, as if things couldn't have gotten any stranger. They wiped his memory, put him in a gigantic maze. It was all so crazy, it really did seem funny. His heart skipped a beat when a boy unexpectedly appeared around the corner up ahead, entering the main passage from one of the offshoots to the right, running toward him in the glade. Covered in sweat, his face red, clothes sticking to his body, the boy didn't slow, hardly glancing at Thomas as he went past. He headed straight for the squat concrete building located near the box. Thomas turned as he paused, eyes riveted to the exhausted runner, unsure why this new development surprised him so much. Why wouldn't people go out and search the maze? Then he realized others were entering through the remaining 3 glade openings, all of them running and looking as ragged as the guy who just whisked by him. There couldn't be much good about the maze if these guys came back looking so weary and worn. So, one of the things they do is they run into the small building that's there, and of course, because he doesn't have answers, Thomas asks Chuck about it, saying, "What's in that building? Why do you live inside a freaking maze?" At this point, Chuck goes, "I'm not saying another word. I think you should go to bed early. You need your sleep." He held up a finger, pricking up his right ear. "It's about to happen." "What?" Thomas asked, thinking it kind of strange that Chuck was suddenly acting like an adult instead of the little kid desperate for a friend he had been moments earlier. A loud boom exploded through the air, making Thomas jump. It was followed by a horrible crunching, grinding sound. And this is the doors closing. This is the walls moving and what happens every night. So he fought the urge to run out there, slip past the moving slabs of rock before they shut, flee the glade. Common sense went out. The maze held even more unknowns than his situation inside. So I like Thomas. He's logical. He tries to get answers, and even though it's kind of scary to stay in the glade, it makes sense to stay in the glade. So Chuck murmurs you kind of get used to it after a while. Thomas looks around the place again, and Chuck tells him, when nighttime strikes, you definitely want to be in bed. So, starting chapter 5, they ended up back at the homestead. Thomas asks where they're going. Chuck says they're going to the bathroom. And they play a little prank scaring the person in the bathroom, who happens to be Galley. So, even though things between Captain Galley and Thomas already didn't get off on the right foot, now Thomas has been involved in a dumb little prank with Chuck. I'm finding Chuck annoying. I'm just going to say that now. He seems like an okay guy, but I would not play pranks on people I'm surviving with in the middle of a place I don't understand. So, anyway, they get ready to go to bed. Thomas is in a sleeping bag. They're sleeping next to the gardens. And they talk just a little bit. Chuck is telling him, "Hey, you survived your first day. You'll learn a lot in the next couple of days. Start getting used to things." And, Thomas is just like, that's good, I guess. Where'd all these weird words and phrases come from? It's, and of course, Chuck doesn't know. He says, "I don't know. I've only been here a month, remember?" Thomas wondered about Chuck, whether he knew more than he let on. He was a quirky kid, funny, and he seemed innocent, but who was to say? Really, he was just as mysterious as everything else in the Glade. I know he's annoying. I think he just wants a friend, because it's probably not easy to make friends when people don't remember stuff. So, anyway, going on, Thomas is finally getting ready to go to sleep. But, aha! Suddenly the glade, the walls, the maze, it all seemed familiar, comfortable. A warmth of calmness spread through his chest, and for the first time since he found himself there, he didn't feel like the glade was the worst place in the universe. He stilled, felt his eyes widen, his breathing stopped for a moment. What just happened, he thought. What changed? Ironically, the feelings that things would be okay made him slightly uneasy. So, he seems like he's starting to figure things out. I want to be one of those guys that goes out there, he said aloud, not knowing if Chuck was still awake. Inside the maze. Runners, said Thomas, wishing he knew where this was coming from. Whatever they're doing out there, I want in. You don't know what you're talking about, Chuck grumbled and rolled over. Go to sleep. Thomas felt a new surge of confidence, even though he truly didn't know what he was talking about. I want to be a runner. Chuck turned back on his elbow. You forget that little thought right now. Thomas wondered at Chuck's reaction. And Chuck basically tells him, you know, Thomas, newbie, my new friend, forget it. I'll tell Albie tomorrow. Chuck lay down with a laugh. You're a piece of clunk. Go to sleep. Thomas couldn't quit. Something's out there. It feels familiar. Go to sleep. Then it hit Thomas. Here's the interesting part. Like several pieces of a puzzle had been put together. He didn't know what the ultimate picture would be, but his next words almost felt like they were coming from someone else. Chuck, I think I've been here before. So Chuck wakes up, but then he ignores Chuck, which is kind of rude. Drop a bomb like that and then just be like, sleep. But, so here's the interesting thing. What we know so far is it's usually one person a month pops up in the Glade. When Thomas surveyed the guys, I didn't read it, but he thought there was like 50 to 60. So, if no one remembers anything from before the Glade, except maybe during the changing, and there's about 60 people there, that would be 60 months of arrivals, give or take. So, if he has been there and no one remembers him, likely it was at least 5 years ago. But it depends on when people popped up and when their memories were wiped. But I'm trying to piece things together, because that's why I love mysteries. They're fun to piece things together. So, again, if Thomas has been there, then it's because it was 5 years ago-ish. So, someone shook Thomas awake. It was Newt, the guy who seemed to be the second in command. The air reeked of his morning breath. That's so gross. I hate morning breath. So it seems like they don't have toothbrushes, or if they do, they don't use them, because it's, 60 adolescent boys all living together. So, anyway, he goes off with Newt. Thomas notices the small red lights flashing here and there. He asks what they are. And Newt's just like, when you bloody need to know, you'll know, Greenie. So, it's kind of annoying. They really should just answer his questions. But it might take forever if they did. So, Newt tells him to shut up. And they're about to go to a window on the side of the maze. And when they look through... Here we go. Out there's the maze, Newt whispered, eyes wide as if in a trance. Everything we do, our whole life, Greenie, revolves around the maze. But technically the maze revolves around them if the Glade's in the middle, but anyway. Every 11th second of every 11th day, we spend in honor of the maze trying to solve something that's not shown us it has a bloody solution, And we want to show you why it's not to be messed with. Show you why them buggin' walls close shut every night. Show you why you never, never want to find your butt out there. So he looks through the window, doesn't see anything at first, haha. But then he does. A large, bulbous creature the size of a cow, but with no distinct shape, twisted and seethed along the ground the corridor outside. It climbed the opposite wall, then leaped at the thick glassed window with a loud thump. Thomas shrieked before he could stop himself, jerked away from the window, but the thing bounced backwards, leaving the glass undamaged. So, that is a griever, Newt explains. The grievers only come out at night, though, so the walls keep them out of the Glade. And Newt tries to use this to basically tell him, that this is the reason why you don't want to be in the maze at all. So, then he talks about their whole goal is to try and figure out the maze and find a way out, though. And then a couple hours later, the doors open. Let's see. Thomas is wondering about the grievers. And later on, Albie comes up, asking what it was like looking out the window. And then Albie lets him know he's going to give him the official tour now. Tells him he's not allowed to ask any questions until the end, and then he'll answer them for him. And Thomas basically says, fine, but tell me everything. I want to know everything. And so they go off. They start their tour. They start at the box, which is where Thomas showed up. Albie explains, once a month we get a newbie like you, never fails. Once a week we get supplies, clothes, some food. Ain't needing a lot, pretty much run ourselves in the Glade. So they talk about how everything's pretty much easy. Albie points everything out. Glade is cut into 4 sections: gardens, bloodhouse, homestead, deadheads. You got that? Thomas hesitated, then shook his head confused. Albie's eyelids fluttered briefly as he continued. It looked like he could think of 1,000 different things he'd rather be doing. I kind of get that. Nobody likes newbies, so he explains, gardens where they grow the crops, water's pumped in, never rains here. Bloodhouse is where they raise and slaughter the animals. Homestead, it's where they live. And then there's the deadheads, which is the graveyard back in a corner near some thicker woods, and that there's not much else. You can go to sit there, rest, hang out. I'm not one for hanging out in graveyards, but might be nice in the Glade. He goes over to the south door, explains everything. Thomas starts wondering why they even need a graveyard in a place like the Glade, because everybody's so young. It's surprising that they're dying off. So Thomas asks lots of good questions, which is good. Let's see. Albie starts talking about the maze, that the grievers are there. Let's see here. Albie mentions that he's been there for 2 years. Ain't none been here longer. The few before me are already dead. 2 years we've tried to solve this thing, no luck. Shuck and Wolves move out there at night just as much as these two here. So, longest person who's been there has only been there 2 years. So it's definitely possible for Thomas to have been there 5 years ago if he's been there. Let's see. They talk about the walls moving in the maze. Thomas explains that he wants to be a runner, and Albie's like, no, forget it. And so then something happens. Because he keeps asking questions, and Albie reminds him, no questions till the end, blah, blah, blah. He was cut off by a booming, ringing alarm that sounded from all directions. Thomas clamped his hands to his ears, looking around as the siren blared, his heart about to thump his way out of his chest, but when he focused back on Albie, he stopped. Albie wasn't acting scared. He appeared confused, surprised. When Thomas asks what's going on, that's weird, was all Albie said as he, scanned the Glade. What's up with that? The boy asked, looking to Thomas for some reason. I don't know, Albie murmured back, but Thomas couldn't stand anymore. Albie, what's going on? The box, Shuckface, the box! It was all Albie said before he set off for the middle of the Glade, a brisk pace that almost looked to Thomas like a panic. What's it about? Thomas demanded, hurrying to catch up. Albie didn't answer or slow down. Skip, skip, skip. Thomas spots Newt and says, Newt, what's going on? He yelled. Newt glanced over him. He swatted Thomas on the back. It means a bloody newbie's coming up the box. He pauses if Thomas to seem impressed. Right now. So, as Thomas looked more closely at Newt, he realized what he'd mistaken for calm was actually disbelief. So, Newt replied, his jaw dropping slightly, Greenie, we've never had 2 newbies show up in the same month, much less 2 days in a row. And with that, he ran off towards the homestead. So, that's 7 chapters. Again, the goal is to go through 7 chapters a week over the next 9 weeks, but it'll take 10 weeks with a break for Comic Con. So, here's what we know. Thomas thinks he might remember being in the Glade. That would have had to have been about 5 years ago. Another newbie is coming up the box, which only happens monthly. Grievers are really bad. You don't want to get attacked by them. And I think that's it. So again, if you're reading along, please leave comments. Hopefully no spoilers. And that's all I've got for now. I'm just a newbie at this point. Looking forward to the next section, and I will post another video next Monday for Maze Runner Mondays. Still excited. Woo! Bye!